The yellow school bus pulled up to Riverside High School on a cold Monday morning in February. Among the students getting off was a tall, quiet 17-year-old named Damon. He adjusted his backpack straps and looked up at the 3-story brick building that would be his new school for the rest of his senior year. Moving in the middle of senior year wasn't something Damon had wanted. His dad got a promotion at the engineering firm where he worked, and the family had to relocate from their small hometown to this bigger city. Damon's mom tried to make it sound exciting, talking about new opportunities and fresh starts, but all Damon could think about was leaving behind his friends, his old school where he knew everyone, and the gym where he'd been training for the past 5 years. Walking through the front doors, Damon noticed how different everything felt. Riverside High was 3 times bigger than his old school. Students filled the hallways, talking loudly and rushing to their lockers. The walls were covered with posters about upcoming events, college prep classes, and sports tryouts. Everything seemed to move faster here. Damon made his way to the main office to get his schedule and locker assignment. The secretary, Mrs. Peterson, was friendly enough. She handed him a map of the school and explained where his classes were located. "Don't worry, honey," she said with a smile. "You'll get used to it in no time. Most of our students are pretty welcoming." His first class was American History with Mr. Rodriguez. Damon found the classroom and quietly took a seat in the back row. He'd learned long ago that sitting in the back helped him avoid unwanted attention. As other students filed in, he noticed a few curious glances in his direction, but nobody said anything to him. The teacher introduced him to the class. "Everyone, we have a new student joining us. This is Damon, and he's transferred here from Millfield. I'm sure you'll all make him feel welcome." A few students turned around to look at him. Some smiled politely, but most just went back to their conversations. During lunch, Damon sat alone at a table near the windows. He pulled out the sandwich his mom had packed and watched the other students. Groups of friends laughed together. Couples sat close to each other, and everyone seemed to have their place. He wondered if he'd ever find his place here. That's when he first noticed them. 3 guys sitting at a table across the cafeteria. The one in the middle seemed to be the leader. Blonde hair, Letterman jacket, the kind of guy who looked like he owned the place. His name was Tyler, Damon would later learn. Tyler was pointing in his direction and saying something to his friends that made them laugh. Damon tried not to think much about it. Maybe they weren't even talking about him. Maybe he was just being paranoid because he was the new guy. He finished his lunch quickly and headed to his next class. The rest of the day passed without incident. Damon went to his classes, tried to pay attention, and kept to himself. His teachers seemed nice enough, and the work wasn't too different from what he'd been doing at his old school. By the time the final bell rang, he was exhausted. Not from the schoolwork, but from the effort of trying to fit into a completely new environment. On the bus ride home, Damon thought about his old life. Back in Millfield, he'd been training at Phoenix MMA Academy since he was 12 years old. What started as a way to build confidence had become his passion. His coach, Tony, had seen something special in him. By 15, Damon was competing in amateur tournaments. By 16, he'd won several regional championships. Just before the move, he'd even turned professional, winning his first 2 fights. But that was his secret now. His parents thought it might be better if he focused on school instead of fighting. They worried about him getting hurt, about the time it took away from his studies. They didn't understand that the gym wasn't just where he trained, it was where he felt most like himself. At home that evening, Damon's little sister Zoe asked him about his first day. "Did you make any friends? Was everyone nice to you?" She wanted to know. Zoe was only 14, but she had this way of making friends wherever she went. Damon wished he had her natural ability to connect with people. "It was fine," he told her. "Just need some time to adjust." His mom, Linda, looked concerned. "Are you sure everything's okay? You seem a little down," Damon nodded. "Yeah, just different than home, you know? I'll get used to it." That night, instead of doing homework, Damon found himself looking up local MMA gyms online. There were several in the area, but none of them felt right. Phoenix Academy had been like a second home to him. Coach Tony wasn't just an instructor. He was like a mentor, always pushing Damon to be better, not just as a fighter, but as a person. The next morning brought the same routine. Bus to school, navigate the crowded hallways, sit in the back of classrooms, eat lunch alone. But this time, Tyler and his friends were more obvious about watching him, When Damon walked past their table, Tyler made a comment just loud enough for him to hear. "Look at the new guy. Thinks he's tough or something." Damon kept walking. He'd dealt with guys like Tyler before. Bullies usually got bored if you didn't give them a reaction. At least that's what he hoped would happen here. During gym class, they were playing basketball. Damon was actually pretty athletic. All those years of training had given him good coordination and reflexes. But he held back, not wanting to stand out. When Tyler deliberately bumped into him during a play, Damon just apologized and moved on. "Watch where you're going," Tyler said, loud enough for others to hear. Damon could feel the other students watching, waiting to see what would happen. He just nodded and continued playing. Inside, though, something was stirring. The part of him that had been trained to defend himself, to never back down from a challenge, was starting to wake up. After school, as Damon waited for his bus, Tyler and his two friends approached him. Their names were Jake and Connor. He'd learned from overhearing conversations. "Hey, new guy," Tyler said, standing a little too close. "Where'd you come from again?" "Millfield," Damon replied quietly. "Never heard of it." "Must be pretty small if they only sent us one student." Jake laughed. Damon felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his expression neutral. "It's not that small." "Relax, man," Connor said, though his tone wasn't friendly. "We're just being welcoming." "Right, Tyler." Tyler smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. "That's right. We like to get to know all the new students. Make sure they understand how things work around here." The bus arrived, and Damon had never been happier to see those flashing yellow lights. As he climbed the steps, he could hear Tyler saying something to his friends, followed by their laughter. Sitting in his usual seat near the back of the bus, Damon stared out the window and tried to stay calm. He'd been in situations like this before, but that was when he had Tony and his teammates to back him up. Here he was completely on his own. That evening, he called Coach Tony. Just hearing his familiar voice made Damon feel a little better. "How's the new school treating you, champ?" Tony asked. "It's okay," Damon said. "Just taking some time to adjust. You know, there's a great gym about 20 minutes from where you're living now. Guy who runs it is an old friend of mine. Want me to give him a call?" Damon was tempted, but he remembered his parents' concerns. "Maybe later. I want to focus on school for now." After hanging up, Damon lay in bed thinking about what lay ahead. He hoped things would get better, that Tyler and his friends would lose interest and move on to someone else. But deep down, he had a feeling this was just the beginning. 2 weeks had passed since Damon started at Riverside High, and things weren't getting better. If anything, they were getting worse. What had started as curious looks and occasional comments had turned into something more deliberate and mean-spirited. Tyler and his friends had made it their daily mission to make Damon's life difficult. It started small, a shoulder bump in the hallway that was just hard enough to make Damon stumble. "Sorry, didn't see you there," Tyler would say with that fake smile of his. Then there were the comments during lunch, always just loud enough for Damon to hear, but quiet enough that teachers wouldn't notice. "Must be tough being the only one like him in most of his classes," Jake would say, and his friends would laugh. Damon tried his best to ignore it. He kept his head down, focused on his schoolwork, and counted the days until graduation. Only a few more months, he told himself. He could handle a few more months, but Tyler wasn't content with just words and bumps in the hallway. One day after gym class, Damon discovered that someone had written things on his locker. The words were hurtful and meant to cut deep. Damon quickly cleaned it off before other students could see, but the damage was done. He knew exactly who was responsible. The worst part wasn't even the bullying itself, it was feeling so completely alone. At his old school, Damon had friends, people who knew him, who respected him for who he was. Here, he was just the quiet new kid who seemed like an easy target. During English class, Mrs. Thompson assigned a group project. When it came time to form teams, Damon found himself sitting alone while everyone else quickly paired up with their friends. He ended up being assigned to a group with 3 other students who clearly weren't happy about it. "Great. We get stuck with the new guy," one of them muttered. Ashley, one of his group members, seemed a little more sympathetic. "Don't mind him," she whispered to Damon. "Kevin's just grumpy about everything." But even Ashley kept her distance, probably not wanting to risk her own social standing by being too friendly with the school's current target. At lunch that day, something happened that made everything worse. Damon was sitting at his usual table by the windows when Tyler and his friends approached. This time they didn't just walk by with comments. Tyler sat down right across from him. "Mind if we join you?" Tyler asked, though he was already settling into the chair. Jake and Connor flanked him on either side. Damon's heart started beating faster, but he kept his voice steady. "Free country." "That's right, it is," Tyler said, leaning forward. "And in this free country, we like to help new students understand how things work. See, every school has its own culture, its own way of doing things." Connor opened his chocolate milk and accidentally spilled some on Damon's homework. "Oops, sorry about that," he said, not sounding sorry at all. Damon watched the milk seep into his math assignment, work he'd spent an hour on the night before. He could feel other students watching, waiting to see how he'd react. Some looked sympathetic, but nobody was going to step in and help. "Accidents happen," Tyler said with a shrug. "Maybe you should be more careful about where you put your stuff." Damon carefully moved his remaining papers away from the spill and continued eating his lunch. Every instinct he'd developed over years of training told him to stand up, to not let this continue. But he also knew what could happen if he lost control. He'd seen what his training could do to someone who wasn't prepared for it. After lunch, Damon went to the bathroom to clean the milk off his homework. As he was standing at the sink, Tyler walked in alone. "You know, I'm starting to think you might be a little slow," Tyler said, checking his reflection in the mirror. "Most people would have gotten the message by now." "What message?" Damon asked, still focused on his ruined homework. "That you don't belong here. This isn't some small-town school where everyone holds hands and sings songs. This is the real world, and in the real world there's a natural order to things." Damon looked up at Tyler's reflection. "And where do you think I fit in this natural order?" Tyler smiled. "Somewhere at the bottom. But don't worry, I'm willing to help you find your place." That afternoon, Damon's phone buzzed with a notification. Someone had created a fake social media account using his name and posted embarrassing things. The posts were designed to make him look bad, to humiliate him in front of the entire school. By the time he got home, half the school had probably seen it. At dinner that night, Damon's sister Zoe noticed he wasn't eating much. "You've been really quiet lately," she said. "Is everything okay at school?" Damon glanced at his parents, who were also looking at him with concern. "Everything's fine. Just adjusting to a bigger school." His dad, Robert, set down his fork. "You know, when I was your age, I had trouble adjusting to new situations, too. It takes time, but things usually work out. Sometimes you have to make an effort to put yourself out there," his mom added. "Maybe join a club or a sport? I saw they have a great wrestling team." The mention of wrestling made Damon think about his MMA training. For a moment, he almost told them everything about Tyler, about the bullying, about how much he missed his old gym. But then he thought about how worried they'd be, how they might want to get involved and make things worse. "I'll think about it," he said instead. That night, Damon lay in bed staring at the ceiling. He thought about calling Coach Tony again, but what would he say? That he couldn't handle a few high school bullies? Tony had taught him that a real fighter knows when to fight and when to walk away. But Tony had also taught him that everyone has a breaking point. The next morning brought a new humiliation. Someone had printed out screenshots of the fake social media posts and stuck them all over Damon's locker. Students walking by could see them, and many stopped to read and laugh. Damon quickly tore them down, but the damage was done. He could feel people looking at him differently for the rest of the day. In chemistry class, Tyler was his lab partner, another accident arranged by Jake, who had convinced the teacher to switch the assignments. For an entire hour, Damon had to work closely with the person who was making his life miserable. "You know what your problem is?" Tyler said quietly while they were measuring chemicals. "You think you can just show up here and everything will be handed to you. But that's not how it works." "I never asked for anything to be handed to me," Damon replied, keeping his voice low. "No? Then why are you here taking up space in our AP classes? Why are you sitting in our cafeteria? Why are you acting like you belong?" Damon felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Because I'm a student here just like you." Tyler laughed softly. "No, not just like me. See, I've earned my place here. My family has been part of this community for generations. My dad went to this school, my grandfather went to this school. We belong here. You're just visiting." After school, Damon sat on the bus and tried to process what was happening to him. He'd dealt with difficult people before, but this felt different. Tyler wasn't just some random bully. He seemed to genuinely believe that Damon didn't deserve to be at Riverside High. When he got home, Damon went straight to his room and pulled out his phone. He scrolled through pictures from his old school, his old friends, his old gym. There was a photo of him and Coach Tony after his last amateur fight, both of them grinning at the camera. Coach Tony had his arm around Damon's shoulders, proud as any father would be. In that photo, Damon looked confident, strong, sure of himself. The person in that photo would never let someone like Tyler push him around. But that person also had a support system, people who had his back no matter what. Here, he was completely alone. Damon closed his eyes and tried to remember what Coach Tony always said. Fighting isn't about being the toughest guy in the room. It's about protecting yourself and the people you care about, but sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away. The problem was Damon was running out of places to walk away to, and Tyler was making it clear that this wasn't going to stop anytime soon. As he lay in bed that night, Damon made a decision. He would try one more time to handle this peacefully. He would continue to ignore Tyler, continue to focus on his studies, continue to count down the days until graduation. But if Tyler pushed too far, if he crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, Damon wasn't sure he'd be able to control what happened next. And that scared him more than Tyler ever could, because Damon knew exactly what he was capable of when he stopped holding back. The question was whether Tyler was smart enough to stop before he found out too. The day everything changed started like any other. Damon woke up, got ready for school, and tried to prepare himself mentally for another day of dealing with Tyler and his friends. It had been a month since he'd started at Riverside High, and the bullying had only gotten worse. Tyler had recruited more people to his cause. What started as 3 guys making his life difficult had turned into a larger group that seemed to enjoy having someone to pick on. They'd make comments when he walked by, trip him in the hallways, and steal his lunch when teachers weren't looking. The fake social media account had been just the beginning. Someone had started spreading rumors about Damon's family, saying they didn't belong in their new neighborhood. They'd created fake stories about why he'd transferred schools, each one more ridiculous than the last. During first period history class, Damon tried to focus on Mr. Rodriguez's lecture about World War II, but his concentration kept breaking. Tyler sat 2 rows ahead of him, occasionally turning around to smirk or mouth words that only Damon could see. It was like psychological warfare designed to keep him on edge all the time. At lunch, Damon had started eating in the library instead of the cafeteria. Mrs. Chen, the librarian, was kind enough to look the other way even though food wasn't technically allowed. It was the only place he could get some peace during the school day, but Tyler had figured out his new routine. "There you are," Tyler said, walking into the library with Jake and Connor. "We've been looking for you." Mrs. Chen looked up from her desk. "Boys, you need to keep your voices down in here." "Sorry, Mrs. Chen," Tyler said with his most polite voice. "We just needed to discuss a group project with Damon." Damon felt his stomach clench. There was no group project, and they all knew it. But Mrs. Chen didn't know that, and she went back to her work while Tyler and his friends surrounded Damon's table. "We need to talk," Tyler said, sitting down across from him. "Outside." "I'm eating lunch," Damon replied quietly. "You can finish it later," Jake said, reaching over and taking Damon's sandwich. "This looks good. Mind if I try it?" Before Damon could answer, Jake had taken a big bite and handed it to Connor, who also took a bite before putting it back on Damon's tray. It was disgusting and disrespectful, and they knew it. "Come on," Tyler said, standing up. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Damon looked around the library. Mrs. Chen was helping another student and hadn't seen what just happened. A few other students were there, but they were all focused on their own work. Nobody was going to help him. He followed Tyler and his friends outside to the courtyard behind the school. It was the area where students sometimes went to eat lunch when the weather was nice, but today it was empty. Damon realized they'd probably planned this, waiting for a time when no one else would be around. "Here's the thing," Tyler said once they were alone. "You've been here for a month now, and you still don't seem to understand how things work." "I understand perfectly," Damon said. "You want me to be afraid of you?" Tyler laughed. "Fear has nothing to do with it. This is about respect, about knowing your place. And what place is that?" "Somewhere else," Connor said. "Maybe you should ask your parents to transfer you again. Find a school that's more suitable." Damon felt something shift inside him. It was one thing to go after him, but bringing his family into it crossed a line. "Leave my family out of this," he said, his voice getting harder. "Or what?" Jake asked, stepping closer. "What are you going to do about it?" For the first time since arriving at Riverside High, Damon didn't back down. "You really don't want to find out." Tyler seemed excited by this change in Damon's attitude. "Oh, now we're getting somewhere. The quiet guy has some fight in him after all." "I don't want to fight you," Damon said, and he meant it. Despite everything they'd put him through, he still hoped this could end without violence. "That's too bad," Tyler said, "because sometimes we don't get what we want." He reached into his backpack and pulled out a small photo, one that Damon recognized immediately. It was a picture of his grandfather, the man who'd first introduced him to martial arts when he was just a kid. Damon kept it in his wallet as a reminder of where his training had come from. "Cute picture," Tyler said, holding it up. "Found this when Jake bumped into you yesterday and your wallet fell out. Old guy looks pretty tough. Too bad he's not here to protect you now." "Give that back," Damon said, his voice deadly quiet. "What's the magic word?" Tyler asked, waving the photo in the air. "Give it back. Now." Tyler looked at his friends and grinned. "I don't think I heard the magic word." He held the photo higher as if he was going to tear it. That's when something inside Damon snapped. His grandfather had been the most important person in his life. The man who'd taught him that strength wasn't about hurting people, but about protecting what mattered. The man who died just 6 months before Damon's family moved, leaving him feeling lost and alone in the world. "Last chance," Damon said, and there was something in his voice that made Connor take a step back. Tyler either didn't hear the warning or chose to ignore it. He started to tear the photo, ripping it slowly in half. The years of training took over before Damon's conscious mind could stop them. In one fluid motion, he stepped forward and grabbed Tyler's wrist with his left hand, while his right hand shot out in a perfectly controlled strike to Tyler's solar plexus. Tyler dropped the torn photo and doubled over, gasping for air. His friends stared in shock as their leader, the guy who'd seemed so tough and in control, struggled to breathe. "What did you do to him?" Jake demanded, but his voice shook. Damon picked up the pieces of his grandfather's photo with hands that weren't quite steady. The careful control he'd maintained for weeks was gone, replaced by something colder and more dangerous. "I warned him," Damon said simply. Tyler was starting to recover, but he was looking at Damon with new eyes. The quiet, passive kid he'd been tormenting was gone, replaced by someone who moved with the fluid confidence of a trained fighter. You can't just," Tyler wheezed. "Can't what?" Damon asked, his voice still eerily calm. "Can't defend myself? Can't stand up when you cross the line?" Connor pulled out his phone. "I'm calling security." "Go ahead," Damon said. "Tell them how you cornered me alone, stole my property, and destroyed something that belonged to my dead grandfather. I'm sure they'll be very interested." For the first time since this all started, Tyler's friends looked uncertain. They'd been so used to picking on someone who wouldn't fight back that they'd never considered what would happen if he did. Tyler slowly straightened up, still holding his stomach. There was fear in his eyes now, but also anger. "This isn't over," he said. "Yes, it is," Damon replied. "You got what you wanted. You pushed me until I pushed back. Now you know what happens when you go too far. You think you're tough because you got in one lucky shot?" Damon looked at him for a long moment. "Tyler, that wasn't a lucky shot. That was me holding back. If I wanted to hurt you, really hurt you, you'd be on your way to the hospital right now. This was just a warning." There was something in the way he said it that made all three bullies realize they'd been playing with fire without knowing it. The quiet new kid they'd been tormenting wasn't helpless at all. He'd been choosing not to fight back. "Who are you?" Jake asked quietly. Damon carefully folded the torn pieces of his grandfather's photo and put them in his pocket. "I'm someone who came here wanting to be left alone. Someone who tried to handle this peacefully, but you wouldn't let that happen." Tyler was recovering his composure, but the dynamic had completely shifted. "You think this makes you the tough guy now?" "No," Damon said. "I think this makes me someone you shouldn't have messed with in the first place." The bell rang, signaling the end of lunch period. Students would be coming outside soon, and all four of them knew it would be better if no one saw them there together. As they walked back toward the school, Tyler tried one last time to assert dominance. "This doesn't change anything. You're still the outsider here." Damon stopped walking and turned to face him. You're right. I am an outsider. But now you know what this outsider is capable of when you push him too far. The question is, are you smart enough to learn from this, or do you need another lesson? Tyler didn't answer, but the fear in his eyes said everything. As they entered the school building, other students looked at them curiously. Something had clearly happened. Tyler looked shaken. His friends were unusually quiet, and Damon carried himself differently than he had that morning. Word would spread quickly through the school. By the end of the day, everyone would know that the quiet new kid wasn't as helpless as he'd seemed. The question was, what would happen next? Damon went to his afternoon classes, but his mind was elsewhere. He kept thinking about the look in Tyler's eyes when he realized what he was dealing with. It wasn't satisfaction he felt, but a kind of sadness. He'd tried so hard to avoid this moment, to handle things peacefully. But sometimes peaceful solutions only work when both sides want peace. And Tyler had made it clear that peace was never an option. News traveled fast at Riverside High School, especially when it involved Tyler Mitchell. By the time the final bell rang that afternoon, half the school had heard some version of what happened in the courtyard during lunch. The stories varied wildly. Some said Damon had used a weapon. Others claimed he'd knocked Tyler unconscious. And a few even suggested it had been some kind of martial arts demonstration gone wrong. Damon could feel the stares as he walked through the hallways. Students who had never paid attention to him before were now watching his every move. Some looked curious, others seemed impressed, and a few appeared genuinely frightened. It was exactly the kind of attention he'd been trying to avoid since arriving at the school. Ashley from his English class caught up with him at his locker. "Is it true?" she asked quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "Is what true?" Damon replied, gathering his books for homework. "That you're some kind of fighter? People are saying all sorts of crazy things." Damon closed his locker and looked at her. Ashley had always been polite to him, even when others weren't. She deserved an honest answer. "I've had some training," he said simply. "But I never wanted anyone to know about it." "Why not?" "I mean, if I could do what people are saying you did, I'd probably tell everyone." "Because this is exactly what I was trying to avoid," Damon said, gesturing at the students who were still watching them. "I came here to finish school and move on with my life, not to be known as the guy who fights." Ashley nodded thoughtfully. "Tyler's been picking on people for years. Someone needed to stand up to him eventually. I didn't want it to be me." That evening at dinner, Damon's parents noticed he seemed different, more tense, more withdrawn than usual. "How was school today?" his mom asked, serving him a helping of her famous lasagna. "Fine," Damon said, but he wasn't really paying attention to the conversation. He kept thinking about what might happen tomorrow, whether Tyler would try to retaliate or if the administration would get involved. His sister Zoe wasn't fooled by his one-word answer. "You look like something's bothering you." Damon glanced at his parents. He'd managed to keep the bullying situation from them for over a month, but after what happened today, that might not be possible much longer. "Just had a long day," he said. His phone buzzed with a text message, then another, and another. Word about the incident had spread beyond the school. Someone had posted about it on social media, and now people were trying to find out more about him. The first message was from Tyler himself. "This isn't over." The second was from someone he didn't recognize. "Heard you know how to fight, respect." The third was from Coach Tony back home. "Heard through the grapevine that something happened at your school. Call me when you get a chance." Damon excused himself from dinner and went to his room to call his old coach. Tony picked up on the first ring. "What's going on, champ?" "I got a call from Jimmy Martinez. He runs that gym I told you about near your new place. Said there's talk around town about some kid at the high school who might have some real training." Damon sank into his desk chair. How did word get to him so fast? Small community when it comes to fighters. People talk. "So what happened?" Damon told Tony everything, about Tyler and his friends, about the bullying that had been going on for weeks, about the photo of his grandfather, and about what happened in the courtyard. Tony listened without interrupting. When Damon finished, there was a long pause. "You did the right thing," Tony finally said. "I taught you to walk away when you could, but I also taught you to stand up when you had to. Sounds like this Tyler kid pushed things past the point where walking away was an option. I tried to handle it peacefully for so long. I didn't want anyone to get hurt. And that's exactly why I'm proud of you. A real fighter doesn't look for trouble. but he doesn't run from it when it finds him. The fact that you held back for as long as you did shows real discipline. But now everyone knows. The whole school is talking about it. Good, Tony said firmly. Let them talk. Maybe it'll make some other bullies think twice before they pick on someone. The next morning, Damon arrived at school to find Principal Johnson waiting for him at the front entrance. Mr. Williams, the principal said, I need to see you in my office. Damon's heart sank. He'd been hoping the administration wouldn't get involved, but apparently that had been wishful thinking. Principal Johnson's office was exactly what you'd expect. Diplomas on the walls, family photos on the desk, and a general atmosphere of authority and order. The principal was a tall man in his 50s who'd been running Riverside High for over a decade. Sit down, son, he said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. We need to talk about what happened yesterday. What did you hear? Damon asked carefully. I heard that there was an altercation between you and Tyler Mitchell during lunch period. I also heard that you have some kind of martial arts background that you didn't mention when you enrolled here. Damon shifted in his chair. I didn't think it was relevant. Well, it's relevant now. Tyler's parents are considering pressing charges. They're saying you attacked their son without provocation. That's not what happened. Principal Johnson leaned back in his chair. Then why don't you tell me what did happen? Damon told his story, starting with the first day Tyler had targeted him and going all the way through to the incident with his grandfather's photo. He explained about the fake social media account, the constant harassment, and how he'd tried repeatedly to avoid confrontation. The principal listened carefully, taking notes. When Damon finished, he was quiet for a moment. Why didn't you report any of this to a teacher or administrator? Because I thought I could handle it myself. I didn't want to make trouble for anyone. And your martial arts training, how extensive is it? Damon hesitated. Once he answered this question, there would be no going back to being just another student. I've been training since I was 12. I competed in amateur tournaments and recently turned professional. Principal Johnson's eyebrows went up. Professional? You mean you fight for money? I had 2 professional fights before we moved here. Both wins. I see. The principal made another note. That does complicate things. You have to understand. When someone with your level of training gets into a physical altercation with a regular student, it raises serious questions about appropriate use of force. I held back, Damon said. If I hadn't, Tyler would be in the hospital. That's not exactly reassuring. There was a knock on the office door and the secretary poked her head in. Mr. Johnson? Tyler Mitchell and his parents are here. Principal Johnson sighed. Send them in. Tyler walked in with his mother and father, both of whom looked like they meant business. Mrs. Mitchell was a well-dressed woman who clearly came from money, and Mr. Mitchell had the bearing of someone used to getting his way. Principal Johnson, Mr. Mitchell said without preamble, we want to know what you're going to do about this situation. We're still gathering information. Mr. Mitchell, would you like Tyler to give his version of events? Tyler's story was predictably different from Damon's. According to him, they'd just been trying to have a friendly conversation when Damon suddenly attacked him for no reason. He made no mention of the bullying, the stolen photo, or anything else that had led up to the confrontation. He's some kind of professional fighter, Tyler said. He could have killed me. Mrs. Mitchell turned to stare at Damon. Is that true? Are you a professional fighter? I've had some training, Damon said carefully. Some training? Mr. Mitchell demanded. Our son says you moved like someone who's been doing this for years. Principal Johnson held up a hand. Let's all stay calm. I'm going to need to investigate this further before making any decisions. In the meantime, I want both boys to stay away from each other. After Tyler and his parents left, Principal Johnson turned back to Damon. I'm going to be honest with you, he said. This situation is complicated. On one hand, if everything you've told me is true, then Tyler was the aggressor and you were defending yourself. On the other hand, your level of training makes this a very serious matter. What happens now? I'm going to review the security camera footage from the courtyard, speak with some other students who might have witnessed the ongoing situation, and then make a decision about how to proceed. Am I suspended? Not yet. But I want you to be very careful. If there's any more trouble, any at all, you could be looking at expulsion. As Damon left the principal's office, he saw Tyler waiting in the hallway with his friends. Tyler's face was bruised where Damon had hit him, and he was clearly still angry about what had happened. This isn't over, Tyler said quietly, as Damon walked past. Yes, it is, Damon replied, unless you want to find out what happens when I stop holding back. For the rest of the day, Damon could feel the weight of everyone's attention. Teachers looked at him differently. Students whispered when he walked by, and even the cafeteria workers seemed to know who he was. During lunch, he sat alone again, but this time it felt different. Instead of hiding from attention, he was choosing solitude. Several students approached him throughout the day. Some wanted to thank him for standing up to Tyler. Others wanted to know about his fighting background, and a few seemed genuinely frightened of him. Ashley sat down across from him during lunch. How are you holding up? Been better, Damon admitted. For what it's worth, most people are glad someone finally stood up to Tyler. He's been a problem for a long time. I never wanted to be the guy who solved other people's problems with violence. Sometimes that's the only language bullies understand. That afternoon, Damon got called back to the principal's office. This time, Principal Johnson had a different expression on his face. I've reviewed the security footage, he said. It clearly shows Tyler and his friends approaching you, taking something from you, and Tyler appearing to destroy it before you reacted. I've also spoken with several students who confirmed the pattern of harassment you described. Damon felt a wave of relief wash over him. However, the principal continued, I've also spoken with the school district's legal counsel about your background. They're concerned about liability issues. What kind of liability issues? The kind that come from having a professional fighter enrolled as a regular student. They want to know why this information wasn't disclosed when you enrolled. Because I was trying to leave that life behind and focus on school. Principal Johnson nodded sympathetically. I understand that, and I believe you. But the district has policies about these things. I'm afraid you're going to need to meet with the school board next week to discuss your continued enrollment here. Damon's heart sank. After everything he'd been through, he might end up getting kicked out anyway. The school board meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening in the district's main conference room. Damon sat next to his parents, facing a panel of 7 board members who would decide whether he could continue his education at Riverside High School. The room felt cold and formal, nothing like the warm environment he'd hoped school would be. Board Chairwoman Dr. Elizabeth Hayes looked over her reading glasses at the file in front of her. Mr. Williams, we're here tonight because there are concerns about whether proper disclosure was made regarding your background when you enrolled at Riverside High. Damon's father, Robert, leaned forward. With respect, Dr. Hayes, my son enrolled as a 17-year-old student who wanted to finish his senior year and graduate. His athletic background shouldn't disqualify him from getting an education. Mr. Williams, said board member Tom Fletcher, your son isn't just an athlete. According to our information, he's a professional fighter with a documented record of victories. That raises serious questions about student and staff safety. He was defending himself, Damon's mother, Linda, said firmly. The security footage clearly shows that. Dr. Hayes held up a hand. We're not here to relitigate the incident with Mr. Mitchell. We're here to discuss whether Mr. Williams can continue his enrollment given the circumstances. Principal Johnson stood up from his seat in the back of the room. If I may, Dr. Hayes, I'd like to share what I've learned about this situation over the past week. Please proceed. Principal Johnson. I've conducted extensive interviews with students, teachers, and staff. What I've found is that Mr. Williams was subjected to systematic harassment for over a month. He showed remarkable restraint in not responding earlier, and when he did respond, it was only after his tormentor destroyed something of deep personal value. Board member Sarah Chen looked up from her notes. That still doesn't address the fundamental question of disclosure. Professional fighters are required to register with athletic commissions. This isn't recreational karate. This is someone who fights for money. Coach Tony had driven down from Millfield to attend the meeting. He stood up from the back row. May I speak? He asked. Dr. Hayes nodded. Please identify yourself for the record. My name is Tony Rodriguez. I own Phoenix MMA Academy, and I've been Damon's coach for 5 years. I think there's something you need to understand about this young man. Tony walked forward and turned to face the board. You're treating him like he's some kind of weapon that was smuggled into your school. But that's not who Damon is. Yes, he's skilled. Yes, he's won professional fights. But more importantly, he's one of the most disciplined and respectful young people I've ever trained. Board member Fletcher interrupted. Mr. Rodriguez, we appreciate your loyalty to your student, but the fact remains that he used those skills against another student. After weeks of provocation, Tony replied firmly. And even then, he showed incredible restraint. If Damon had wanted to seriously hurt that boy, he could have. Instead, he used the minimum force necessary to stop the situation. Dr. Hayes looked at Damon. Mr. Williams, would you like to speak on your own behalf? Damon stood up slowly. He'd been dreading this moment, but he knew he had to be honest. I never wanted anyone to know about my fighting background, he began. I came to Riverside hoping to be just another student. I thought if I kept quiet and focused on my studies, I could finish the year without any problems. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Tyler and his friends made that impossible. For weeks they harassed me, humiliated me, and tried to make me feel like I didn't belong. I could have stopped it at any time, but I chose not to because I was afraid of exactly this. Sitting in this room, being treated like I'm dangerous. Board member Chen leaned forward. But you are dangerous, aren't you? Your training makes you dangerous. My training makes me disciplined, Damon corrected. It makes me respectful. It makes me understand the responsibility that comes with knowing how to fight. That's why I tried so hard to avoid fighting. Dr. Hayes consulted her notes. Mr. Williams, if we allow you to continue at Riverside, how can we be sure there won't be future incidents? Because now everyone knows, Damon said simply. The secret's out. Tyler and his friends know what happens if they push too far. Other potential bullies know I'm not an easy target. The problem that led to the incident has been solved. An unexpected voice spoke up from the back of the room. Excuse me? Everyone turned to see Ashley standing up along with about a dozen other students who had quietly entered during the meeting. Dr. Hayes looked surprised. This is a closed meeting, young lady. Please, Ashley said. We're here to speak for Damon. My name is Ashley Rodriguez, and I'm a senior at Riverside High. Principal Johnson whispered something to Dr. Hayes, who nodded reluctantly. You have 2 minutes. Ashley walked to the front of the room, followed by the other students. Dr. Hayes, members of the board, we wanted you to know that Damon Williams is not the problem at our school. Tyler Mitchell is. She turned to face the board directly. For 3 years, Tyler and his friends have made life miserable for dozens of students. They pick on anyone who's different, anyone who doesn't fit their idea of who belongs at Riverside. Damon is just the first person who was able to stand up to them. Another student, a quiet boy named David, stepped forward. Tyler pushed me down a flight of stairs last year. I ended up in the hospital with a broken wrist. When I reported it, I was told it was an accident. A girl named Lisa spoke next. He and his friends cornered me in the parking lot after homecoming and said things I can't repeat in front of adults. When I told my parents, they wanted to call the police, but I begged them not to because I was afraid it would make things worse. One by one, the students shared their stories. The board members listened with growing concern as a pattern of harassment and intimidation emerged that went far beyond what had happened to Damon. When the students finished, Dr. Hayes looked shaken. Principal Johnson, were you aware of these allegations? Principal Johnson shifted uncomfortably. We've had some complaints about Mr. Mitchell over the years, but nothing this extensive. Board member Fletcher turned to Damon. Mr. Williams, did you know about these other incidents when you confronted Mr. Mitchell? No, sir, Damon replied. I was just trying to protect myself and my grandfather's memory. Dr. Hayes called for a brief recess, and the board members huddled together for 15 minutes of intense discussion. When they returned, her expression was serious. Mr. Williams, she said, after hearing all the testimony tonight, this board has reached a decision. You will be allowed to continue your enrollment at Riverside High School. Damon felt his mother squeeze his hand as relief washed over him. However, Dr. Hayes continued, there will be conditions. You will meet with the school counselor weekly to discuss any situations that might lead to conflict. You will also be required to participate in a peer mentoring program, using your experience to help other students who are dealing with bullying. I'd be happy to do that, Damon said. Furthermore, she said, looking at Principal Johnson, this board directs the administration to conduct a full investigation into the harassment allegations we've heard tonight. We will not tolerate a culture of bullying at any of our schools. After the meeting, students crowded around Damon in the parking lot. Many thanked him for standing up to Tyler. Others asked about his fighting background, and some wanted to know about the peer mentoring program. Ashley approached him as the crowd thinned out. How does it feel to be the most famous student at Riverside High? Damon laughed. Not exactly what I was going for when I transferred here. Maybe not, but look at what's happened. Tyler's been suspended pending investigation. 3 other students have come forward with bullying complaints. The administration is finally taking this seriously. Over the following weeks, Riverside High began to change. Tyler was eventually expelled after the investigation revealed a pattern of harassment that went back years. 2 of his friends were suspended, and the 3rd transferred to another school. The peer mentoring program that Damon helped create became one of the most successful anti-bullying initiatives the district had ever implemented. Students who were being harassed learned they had someone to talk to who understood what they were going through. Damon also reconnected with his love of martial arts, but in a different way. He started teaching basic self-defense classes at the local community center, focusing on building confidence rather than learning how to fight. Coach Tony visited regularly, and eventually Damon returned to training. Not because he wanted to continue fighting professionally, but because the gym had always been where he felt most like himself. 3 months after the incident in the courtyard, Damon was walking through the halls of Riverside High when he noticed a new student sitting alone at lunch. The boy looked nervous and out of place the way Damon had felt on his first day. Without hesitation, Damon walked over and sat down across from him. "First day?" he asked. The boy nodded. "Yeah, I'm Kevin. I'm Damon. I transferred here a few months ago. Want some company?" Kevin looked relieved. "That would be great." As they talked, Damon realized that his experience at Riverside, as difficult as it had been, had taught him something important. Sometimes the worst situations lead to the most meaningful changes. He'd come to the school hoping to hide who he was, but ending up sharing his story had helped not just himself, but dozens of other students. By the time graduation rolled around, Damon had been accepted to 3 different colleges on academic scholarships. More importantly, he'd helped create a school environment where students like Kevin could feel safe and welcome from their very first day. At the graduation ceremony, Principal Johnson called Damon's name with obvious pride. As he walked across the stage to receive his diploma, the audience erupted in applause, not just from his family but from classmates, teachers, and even some school board members. In his graduation speech, Damon talked about the importance of standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. He spoke about the difference between being strong and being a bully, and about how real strength comes from protecting others rather than intimidating them. After the ceremony, Tyler's mother approached Damon and his family. Everyone tensed, expecting more conflict, but she surprised them. "I wanted to apologize," she said quietly. "We didn't raise Tyler to be cruel, but we also didn't teach him to respect people who were different from him. What happened forced us to take a hard look at our son's behavior, and we're getting him the help he needs."